My father, before he died, he told me that he'd spent most of his life imagining that Scotland could be a utopia. And he died rather unhappy in as much as that had not come to pass. He'd seen 2 referendums on independence happen within his lifetime, and he was sure that that was the key to his own personal happiness and to freedom. And I said to him, well, Dad, you know, the idea of having Scotland as a utopia is a little bit flawed in as much as Utopia tends to be an island, or historically has been an island. And he said, oh, well, we'll just sail away then from England. And this is very much part of the kind of utopian ethos, to sail away across the ocean and to start again. I've become very interested in the way that Utopia clings to certain myths and motifs. I'm rather concerned now in the 500th anniversary of Sir Thomas More's Utopia that we're seeing a bit of a resurgence in utopianism in the world, whether that's eco-utopianism, technological utopianism, social justice warriors who believe they can make the world a perfect place, and so on. So I thought I'd bring my dad back to life just to have a conversation with him about how his utopia could actually work. What would it be like? So first of all, my father insists that we sail away and we find a place that no one's ever found before. And this, when you look at the history of utopias, you see there's a great parallel between the unmapped world and the rise in utopian beliefs. For example, in the 17th century, you had the Salzburgers, the Mennonites, and the Huguenots all fleeing from persecution across the ocean to the unmapped spaces of America. And the whole idea of a world which has not yet fully been discovered was very prevalent in the Middle Ages, where you see that there's some extraordinary books brought out in the 1400s. There was a chap called Sir John Mandeville who created an entirely fake story of his travels across the world, and some of the characters who inhabited it, you know, used their feet for parasols, had the head of animals, etc. And this was accepted as fact. There was also from the 12th to the 17th century a Christian missionary exploration to find Prester John, the king of an entirely imaginary Christian kingdom, which was supposed to exist somewhere around India. No one bothered to check the fact that a man can't live for 500 years, because that was the age that he would have been. So the idea of terra incognita, the blank slate, is crucial to the utopian ideal. And it's funny because when Scotland actually tried to make its own little utopia in 1700, it went over the ocean as well. There was a thing called the Darien Scheme of 1700, in which 2,000 Scots tried to settle an isthmus in Panama, and only 400 of them came back because they picked the wrong spot. They picked a malarial swamp full of natives and Spaniards. So that was the end of their utopian project. The idea of the blank slate, the empty map, goes way back to the Christians, basically, the foundational myth of Eden. And it flows all the way through Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the French Revolution, up to the hippies, which was where my father came across this idea that we need an empty space for a blank man, that humankind can be redrawn from an empty page. There's a phrase by Chairman Mao, which is that the Chinese peasant is the blank page upon which we draw perfect images. Beautiful pictures. And my father's motif for his utopia was that the new Scotland, the new place of perfection, would be like a newborn child, an image that comes up again and again in utopianism. So one of the reasons that my father is so interested in utopia is the promise of free love, being a randy old man and all that. It's a thing that's been tried again and again and again. It started off in the 3rd century with a heretical cult called the Adamites, who believed in nudity, in communal sex, in community of wives. This means basically that everyone's having sex with everyone else. They believed that this would get rid of competitiveness and covetousness, and that through congress with each other's bodies, they could become closer to God. It was a heresy. They were all wiped out. Again, in the 13th century, it was tried by the Taborites and the Picards and the Brethren of the Free Spirit. The Vatican got whiff of it and slaughtered them all. In the 19th century, there was a very interesting chap called Charles Fourier who decided that in his utopias, which were called phalansteries, everyone would sleep with each other on a rota. You could exchange tokens now. You've all got to sleep with each other. And there was one little quirk to this utopia, which was that the token system favored the elderly. And the tokens could be exchanged for menial labor. So, for example, if you wanted to get out of your rota of cleaning the toilets, you could sleep with Uncle Hector. Having said that, though, he did reserve the job specifically of cleaning the toilets for children because he believed that since they couldn't partake in sexual behavior, that they should do the dirtiest jobs. Now, the whole idea of defending utopia is a huge problem because as soon as you've started this wonderful world in which everyone can have free sex, everyone's going to want to come and have a piece of the action, or they're going to see how your utopia is working and just want to invade you. And part of the problem with the Scottish Darien scheme to start with was that they were constantly fending off invasion left, right, and centre. So I say to my father, who is a pacifist and a hippie, what about protecting yourselves? You're going to have a wall. My father says, yeah, okay, we'll have a wall. Fair enough. I said, well, why stop there? Why don't you have some cannons? And he goes, well, yes, we want to keep those nasty capitalists away, so yeah, we'll have to have some cannons as well. But he doesn't accept, of course, that he's just created a military enclosure to have his utopia within. Then there's the question of work. Who will do what in our enclosed utopia? Now, we could have a setup a bit like that which was proposed by Karl Marx, which is that you spend the morning as a farmer, the afternoon as a fisherman, in the evening you do a bit of arts and crafts, and you can discuss socialism if you want. And believe it or not, there are utopian communities even to today which do try to put that into practice. In Findhorn in the north of Scotland, a place where I have been and stayed, there is a weekly rota, so you do admin, you do house cleaning, and you do gardening. Now, one of the problems I found with this, and a lot of people secretly told me, was that it's really great for demotivation. Because the people who get really good at something, whether it's house cleaning, want to kind of be respected for doing that work. But of course, next week they're on to something they don't want to do and then back again. So it's a kind of anti-specialist system. And it's deliberately so to discourage people from being better than others. So everyone ends up kind of mediocre at everything, and no one really gets a reward. On the subject of rewards, there is, of course, the issue of money. Now, my father is hugely against the idea of money. He's a fan of John Lennon and the song Imagine, Imagine, there's no possessions, I wonder if you can, etc. And we all had a weep at that in the 1970s. But really, what would it be like to have a utopia with no money? Well, there's only really one option, which is you have to have community of property. If you look at Sir Thomas More's Utopia, he states very simply in there that actually what we'll do is we'll pool all our resources, we'll put them in a warehouse. Anytime anyone needs something, pots, pans, clothes, whatever, you go to the warehouse, you file your receipt, we all share everything. And that sounds lovely. And it's been attempted in a few periods of history for real. There was a chap called Gerard Whitstanley who was the founder of the Diggers. And the Diggers managed to achieve community of property before they were wiped out. And again, in Munster in 1503, there were the Anabaptists. And they managed to seize the town, institute the seizure of all wealth, redistribute it to everyone. And this lasted for a whole year, one of the problems, though, with this system that they instituted was that they decided as well to slaughter everyone who was wealthy. There were some allegations as well that at the time the wives were treated as property of the wives of the wealthy. So it wasn't really a great solution. It was, however, a solution which was very captivating to the young Karl Marx, who was inspired by the Diggers and by the Anabaptists and the idea of community of property. Now, when you have community of property, and when you get rid of the money system, you no longer have a price mechanism which tells you, are we running out of trees? Or are we running out of cheese? Just because you can't see the prices going up and down. So what you have to have, and the one thing my father despises, is bureaucracy. You have to have a lot of paperwork all of a sudden in your utopia just to work out what you've got. Are we running out of something? Are we having a surplus of something? When I was in the Findhorn community in the north of Scotland, there was an inexplicable surge in the number of beetroot. You couldn't get rid of the damn things, and you had to eat them day in, day out, whatever. It was creating a problem. There was also a shortage of mayonnaise. And there's nothing that makes your beetroot taste better than a bit of mayonnaise. Now, these are fairly trivial issues, but the whole question of use value comes in here. How do you manage to get a use value for everything? How do you calculate the use value of everything in your utopia? You have to come up with something like a utopian supercomputer. Those on the internet, there's a movement on the internet called the Zeitgeist movement, and it basically expounds that one day there will be a utopian supercomputer in which we will input all the information from the internet and all the information from everyone on our personal needs, and it will calculate the perfect plan for the world, redistributing everyone's everything and making us all equal. Millions of followers on YouTube. I think it's tyrannical, but nonetheless, young people seem to like it. So yeah, it really does beg the question of once you start to calculate the value of everything in utopia, what is the value of privacy? What are the value of pots and pans? Let's say that. Let's say we've gone down the collectivization route and we've got rid of the pots and pans as Chairman Mao did. If you have your own pots and pans in a collectivized economy, it means you're actually starting a black market. Anything that's off the plan with your utopian supercomputer, your total plan, starts to be tradable in a black market. And what you find is the more that communities get planned, the more the black market grows. Basically, someone's going, I'll swap you 45 beetroots for a go with Uncle Hector. Now, when things start to go wrong in utopia, when you have a problem with the beetroot, for example, or you're starving, or the clothes are actually not that great, it would be good to be able to voice your complaints in some way. But what tends to happen within the history of utopian movements, in the 19th century, for example, there were 200 utopian communities in North America. But they get taken over by kind of groupthink. There are those core supporters of the utopia who just want it to work, and they just think, can we just give it another year? We'll sort the beetroot problem out by then. You'll have lettuce, you'll have cheese, and there are the groups of complainers who have to be watched. So what happens, as happened in Mao's China, if you remember this, people were turned into informants on everyone else within the country. And it all starts to get a bit authoritarian. My father is far away now in his sense of what's working as a utopia. This is made worse by the island mentality that is embedded within the utopian ideal. The fact that we've cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. The utopia is no longer trading with the rest of the world. As a result, the people within the utopia no longer have a currency that they can use to buy things that they need from the outside world. Take technology, for example. A mobile phone involves, say, up to 12 pieces that come from different parts of the world and are all put together. The utopians have only got the technology that they arrived with, and it's running down and it's breaking down. And they can't complain because they're under surveillance. And actually, finally, my father realizes that he's going to have to start silencing the people that are complaining. He doesn't want to kill them. He just wants to put them somewhere where no one can hear or see them. The final test of my father's utopia, all this free love that was going on, is children. Children really are the test of the whole blank page theory of utopia. And children fail every test. The children of utopians are not better or nicer than any other children. They say, me, 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 me. They grab, they fight, they bully. And these are all normal developmental stages. And the parents of utopians are kind of disgusted and disappointed with their children. Very few utopias in the history of utopias have lasted more than one generation. Also, mothers don't like, when push comes to shove, no matter how utopian they are, they don't actually take care of other people's children as well as they take care of their own. Fathers are, well, maybe they're pretty useless anyway and are more generally trying to trade things for beetroot with Uncle Hector. But the whole thing just falls apart because people realize that they actually care more for their own kids. And then that's when the mass exodus happens from utopia. So it begs the question of what utopia really is. I think it's a mistake that's come about from the evolution of its own thought. It came about from an unmapped world and from a bunch of Christian heresies which filled in the empty spaces in the map. If you look at some of the utopian thoughts that are popular today, they all tend to rely upon one Christian heresy, millenarianism, the idea that the world is going to end soon. Some disaster is going to happen, and after that, we're going to have utopia. This was the basis for so many utopian movements, which were largely religious throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. The end of the world's coming soon, and after, we're going to be delivered heaven on earth. Think about Marxism in these terms. You have the final collapse of capitalism, and then it leads to universal equality. The French Revolution, the bloody destruction of the people in charge, the kings and queens, and then universal peace. Even the ecological utopia as well is based on the same terror of the impending apocalypse. I think back on my father's life, and I think he could have been happier if he'd known these things about utopia, if he'd known that actually it's really, really tough to make a utopia work, and no one's actually done it yet. And I think he could have been a lot happier if, rather than discounting everything in his life and everyone around him, from the light illuminated from a perfect world, and he found everything wanting, if he'd actually understood that life is compromise and life is not perfect, he would have been a lot happier. So I ask you to erase utopia from your mental map and go and enjoy your beetroot. Thank you.